And you're all very welcome on this horrible morning. At least there's no temptation to go to the beach. Maybe there will be this afternoon and we'll be empty here and everybody will be off swimming. The Galway weather is always unpredictable. Everyone, I'm sure, felt sorry for poor Pegasus last night, going through the streets with the rain pouring down. It didn't stop the kids feeling marvellous, though. They don't care whether they're wet or not. So we soldier on. This is the first of the main programme of First Thoughts that we have over 2 weekends during the festival in Galway. And it's wonderful to see so many people here to listen to our two wonderful speakers. Is Geoffrey Hinton, the inventor of AI, right when he foresees machines becoming more intelligent than us? What would that mean? Are the benefits of AI in health and education enough to make such a risk worthwhile? The swift changes in technology have caught many of us by surprise, often unpleasantly. Many friends of mine who teach in universities are now bedeviled by the problem of whether an essay on Iris Murdoch or the Wars of the Roses has been written by a clever chatbot or the innocent-faced student claiming to have done all the research themselves. And that's the least of it. What if the clever chatbots got smart and realised that we're just self-important worms who can be made to serve their mysterious desires? Always good to start the day with a horror story. But seriously, can AI be regulated to avoid its use by much worse actors than lazy history students? And if so, how? What kinds of things can AI contribute to the good of humanity, even if that also means contributing to the profits of greedy multinational corporations? To elucidate these exhilarating and scarily developments, we have Elaine Burke of the wonderful podcast For Tech's Sake and Adrian Weckler, technology editor at independent newspapers. They will either reassure us or frighten us further, or possibly both. Please welcome them to First Thought Talks.
Perfect.
Ooh.
Okay, go for it, yeah.
I wasn't sure where we should go.
Hi, everyone. Oh, my God.
Dramatic.
Wow. It was quite an intro. There's lots we can talk about artificial intelligence today, like what is artificial intelligence? Most of the buzz stuff is the ChatGPT, the generative AI, all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure where to start. Elaine, on the one hand, AI is going to take our jobs, steal our ideas, kill us. But on the other hand, it might speed up our daily tasks, might make things better, might help us to write our emails. Where do you want to start? Will we start with that bigger question of whether, the Geoffrey Hinton question of whether AI has actually become intelligent or whether it's on the cusp of becoming intelligent or not?
Yeah, where to start with that? It's one of the problems is that we call it artificial intelligence, because then that has a certain meaning and we think of it as intelligence, when it is still just a system that follows rules. And it can do that very well, and it can do it with what seems like intuition. But artificial intelligence is just a name of a field of science, and we shouldn't maybe put too much weight into the definition of those words.
But isn't there a debate about that, though? Because there was a Google engineer called Blake Lemoine.
Oh, poor Blake.
Now, Blake, in case you didn't hear this story, this Google engineer, he was working on an AI bot for Google called Lambda. And he made the bold claim 2 years ago that Lambda was sentient. It was self-aware, right? Now, this caused a huge media thing at the time. Is AI becoming self-aware? And your point, Elaine, was the more sensible one, and which was the one that prevailed. No, it's artificial. It's trained on other things. But on the other hand, what this guy was saying, and what Geoffrey Hinton is saying, and what Elon Musk is saying is, at some point, maybe it doesn't make a difference.
So with Geoff Hinton's comments, like you'll take a snippet and a soundbite, and this happens all the time, of what he said, and you take away all the context, and it sounds like he's heralding our doom. And I would say now he is one of the harbingers of doom out there, and that gets a lot of headlines, gets a lot of attention. And part of the problem around AI and how people understand it is that it's misreported a lot of the time. And I understand that. Never. But I understand that because you have people writing about it who probably don't do science and technology writing like we do. And they probably don't really understand what they're writing about. And they take from what they're being told about it from the companies that develop it. And they want it to sound bombastic. They want it to sound like it's going to steal all your jobs and everything, because that's still actually good advertising for them, because it makes it sound so powerful as a technology. Geoff Hinton did work for one of those companies. He worked at Google, and then when he left Google, he started doing the speaker circuit and getting a lot of attention for things that he was saying in that context. In the broad scope of the field of research of AI and the people who've been doing this work for years, there are way more people who say that artificial general intelligence is probably never going to happen than there are people who say it's going to happen and it's around the corner and it's going to ruin everything.
Elon Musk says it will happen.
I would not put a lot of stock into what he says. We can go there. But that...
In fact, you might even say that people are probably at more danger from Elon Musk's robo-taxis, which he's about to announce next month, by the way, because if you're following that debate, his robo-taxi wants to cut corners, doesn't have the proper sensors on the car by European standards anyway, so he mightn't have the greatest... But there is a body of opinion out there to say that A, AI is becoming as good as software, and B, that it's going to kill us.
Yeah. And it's people are afraid of the sentience idea of it as well. And I mean, broad picture, if it starts misbehaving, unplug it. Because it still has to run on power.
Well,
so
what
that's
if
always
it
going to be a
controls the
solution.
power grid?
Well, like the chances of it being given that power, like you know, we're acting like there is no sandbox, and there is a sandbox. That like there are some restrictions still.
Sandbox.
In place. Yeah, it's kind of creating an area for people to play around in with these kind of technologies, but it's a safer space. It's not being unleashed into the real world, and people do want to use it for automations and things like that. So yeah, they may plug it into things like facilities and utilities, and I mean. We shouldn't have this conversation today without mentioning what happened yesterday. In a world run by machines, a tech outage grounds planes, affects the stock exchanges in a number of countries. It stopped people being able to visit their GPs in the UK.
Couldn't do your NCT here? Did anyone have
an
an NCT test here yesterday?
And they're already so backed up. Like, that's a real big problem.
Topping up your Leap card?
But what was interesting there, what I really found quite interesting about yesterday was people were showing pictures of the workarounds. And it was people in Belfast Airport, because they didn't have the screens telling you your gate times and all that, and crucial information that you're constantly looking at screens at. They put up a whiteboard, and someone was just constantly scribbling on the whiteboard and updating the whiteboard. And someone commented on that saying, it's like we're in the dark ages. And I was like, no, this is human ingenuity at work. People are able to troubleshoot. People are able to think on the fly. People are innovative. That's not a word that belongs to technology. That's a word that belongs to people. And when you're faced with restrictions and you need to do things on the fly and you need to be flexible, machines are not good at flexibility. They're not good at working around a problem because they're used to following logical steps. And that's essentially what you have with these systems. Algorithms, and AI is essentially just a lot of algorithms. They are following logical steps and they're making relational things. And the Blake Lemoine stuff and the sentient stuff, they are responding. And again, it's hard to not use humanizing language around them, but I try to avoid it. But they're responding.
Nobody
to
blames you for that, because
know,
you see those videos
easier.
of the Boston robotics. Have you seen those videos with the robot dog? And he can run or she can run, and somebody goes to try and kick the dog over to show how stable it is, and you're like, leave that dog alone.
Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting thing in robotics. People do feel better about it when they are somewhat humanized, but not in the uncanny valley area. So like people who do like non-humanoid robots might give them name tags, which is something that they did in Dublin Airport for the carrier robots for bringing people's luggage from place to place if they have limited ability. And I know some people working in robotics, and their robots kind of look like a Dyson air filter on wheels, but they put, in a test in Japan, someone stuck googly eyes on it, and people were more likely to help it if it got stuck when it had the googly eyes on it. We're more friendly to things that are kind of like cutesy and Disney-fied robots.
People love their computers as well.
Yeah, like, I mean, people feel like their phone is like their right hand a lot of the time.
There was a case about 15 years ago of a guy in the States, of course, who tried to marry his Macintosh. He tried to marry his MacBook.
Some people like to have relationships with their cars that are beyond the norm.
True. Yes.
It's the safest way I could say that at 10:30 in the morning.
And then there's a whole other session for the Galway Arts Festival about how machines and love interact in a whole after 9 p.m. way.
The whole thing about like, but like that's like, there's a lot of talk about introducing chatbots into mental health care.
Yep.
And it's because services are underfunded and unable to like achieve the level of service that they need to be providing for people. That's a societal ill, And if we just plug in tech to that to solve it, that's a really bad idea. But it is at an emergency and crisis level. You're not going to overnight fix that problem. So would it be possible for people to use chatbots to, say, process things as they would with a counsellor? And there are positive signs for doing that, because if I'm talking to a chatbot and not a person, I may be more likely to reveal things that I wouldn't reveal to a person, because I'm less likely to feel I'm actually being judged. Even like with all the will in the world for a counsellor to make you feel like you're in a safe space, it's still a human being with thoughts and feelings that you're talking to, and you may be a bit more reserved. Or for people who need to engage in the practice of journaling for their own benefit, because that has a lot of well-researched benefits for people. It's hard to get them to do that and to practice that and to form the habit around that. But like a bot that can prompt them and ask them questions about their day and get them to do the journaling that way. Prompts work. As writers, you know that.
You also want to make sure that it's not Google AI overviews that you're talking about that advises you, for example, to stick cheese on a pizza with glue to make it settle better, or to eat a rock every day for nutrition.
Yeah, that's because, so if you know what's happening with the technology, you understand where these mistakes are coming from.
Yeah.
So that Google mistake came because they plugged Reddit into the Google overviews. And there's jokes all over Reddit about eating rocks. It's actually like a really common joke. And there's jokes all over Reddit about putting glue on your pizza. Like, it's just kind of like, if you're an internet person, like, these are really familiar jokes. And that's actually why people knew to put those questions into Gemini and know that it was going to give the wrong answer. So the journalists knew what they were doing as well. And this is the thing about your input.
You're not trying to say that journalists tried to manipulate a news story.
Well, the amount of them that are saying, like, the AI was flirting with me, and then they show the script of their text, so I'm like, you are basically telling the AI to flirt with you, and you've just showed everyone that because you think you're being clever and you've created an AI that's creating feelings, when actually I can see in your transcript that you were pushing it that way. It's trying to do this. So a lot of them are trained on what's called reinforcement learning through human feedback. And I mean, essentially, that's just the system is trying to give you an output that you get a satisfactory result from. So if it gets the idea that you're trying to push it in a certain direction, it's going to go that way. So if you start asking it questions like, do you have an alter ego? Do you have a mind? Like, at first, it will do whatever the rote text is. But if you keep pushing it in that conversation, it's just thinking, okay, well, the operator of the system wants a result that they haven't gotten yet because we're still in this conversation. They haven't reached a satisfactory conclusion. So what gets me to the end of this conversation? It's giving them what they want. It's telling them, yeah, I have an alter ego and it's evil and it's going to take over the world.
Even that aside, though, okay, hallucinations with artificial intelligence is an issue that we have at the moment. So ChatGPT, Google Gemini, I mean, there's a few good examples, and some of them are really tricky. Because it's not just that it's making a massive error, it's that the data it's trained on is giving you back answers according to its best understanding of what human knowledge and human wisdom gives. And there's a few very, very interesting ones on the edge. Google Gemini, for example, there's a few examples where it just got confused. It was asked, for example, to show typical pictures of German Nazi soldiers, right, from Second World War. And it returned a picture of a black man and an Asian woman, okay, in uniform, in a Nazi uniform. Now, you can see sort of why, in one way, it made that result, because it's trying to be representative and diverse in terms of. But on the other hand, like, it was asked, for example, whether there was any right or wrong answer as to whether Elon Musk posting memes on X was any worse than Hitler killing millions of people, and it said it couldn't say. It couldn't say. It didn't know what the answer was.
I'd say, so what's happening there is a couple of things. So there are huge problems, and Google is actually famously caught up in these problems. Like, many, many years ago, if you searched on Google, and I mean, it still happens a little bit more to this day, but if you searched on Google for doctor, you would get a white Western man. And if you searched for nurse, you would get, again, a white Western woman. And that was, and then there was also a problem with Google searches where because of how their data set had been labeled and had also taken some labeling that was from problematic sources. So these are basically, they're just referring back to a data set that has like information and it's labeled a certain way. If you search for gorilla, you got a black person. on Google at one point in time, and that was a huge issue that they had to try and work to fix, and they had to basically sanitize their database because it had been polluted with racist terms and misogynistic terms. And those image databases, there's a researcher based in Ireland called Abeba Berhane, did amazing work on uncovering basically a large image data set that was used in early AI, before we were talking about the Gen AI stuff, that was full of racist and misogynistic and just horrendous terminology.
And in pragmatic terms, what you see in the States, for example, real estate agencies, letting companies, they would try to integrate AI into their services. And frequently when a person of color or a black person was on the books and was looking for somewhere to live, the property website would withhold certain areas from that person because of the way its data set was trained.
Yeah.
Real problems.
And that's the thing. So like it actually comes back to it's how they're built and how they're trained that it actually answers a lot of these issues. So Google's Gemini came up with that image because they worked so hard to try and train out any kind of racial bias out of it, that it was like, you know, always present diverse images, and it over diversified by giving you Black and Asian Nazis. And so it's because of their training data. And this is something that like they're all very, you know, closed-lipped about what's in the training data and how the training is done. Yeah, like OpenAI is the greatest misnomer ever. Yeah. Closed AI is what it is. Because there is a proprietary, you know, protectionism that they have around that, which does make sense because they do want to commercialize this stuff. But if they're not telling you what went into it, I know we're going to talk about the copyright issues there, but if they're also not telling you how it's trained, and maybe not telling the world, but telling like an independent auditor, well then how are we going to know what biases have been encoded in there? And like the biggest thing that this stuff does is it actually magnifies and scales what we already do a lot of the time. So if you asked it to ingest all of the historic data about who makes a good American president, it would say a white man just because the historical data will say that, because history was very prejudiced against like non-white people and women.
What about an orange man?
It probably would tell you he would do a good job. AI is really funny in that it is dispassionate. You know, if there's a really great example of someone plugged it into one of these kind of survival video games and plugged an AI model into it and asked it how it would try and play that game. So it's like they tried to get AIs to learn games, and it's really interesting to watch it learn how to play Go and things like that. But when they plugged it into a survival game, it figured out a way, because you could create people in this game. So it basically created a people farm and then had people being eaten by like a certain monster and stuff like that. It basically created a little factory out of like cannibalism, and it beat the game. Like it was amazing at the game because it did that, but like a lot of people wouldn't think to do that. So it's completely dispassionate. It'll just do like the most extreme logical response. Yeah. And when you think of like the hallucinations and stuff like that, some of them can be very easily explained as well. Like the things that we have with the New York lawyers.
You all know this case. ChatGPT, New York, lawyer goes into a court. He makes his argument. He argues case precedent. 6 of the cases were made up because he used ChatGPT. He said, give me a load of case precedents that will help me in this case against this. ChatGPT gave him made up 6 cases. He argued them in court. He lost in court.
Yeah, and he lost his job. And that's been labeled as hallucinations. But if you're thinking about how this thing that he used works, the transformer model, the T in ChatGPT, is essentially, the most rudimentary way to explain it is it's really, really clever predictive text. If you are going to ask predictive text to write a legal brief for you, it will write something that looks like a legal brief, walks like a legal brief, smells like a legal brief, has all of the kind of layouts and structures that are familiar to a legal brief. All the citations looked like citations would look. It was the language of legalese was being used throughout it. But you didn't ask it to research actual cases and include them. You just asked it to write a legal brief. So it's just kind of like, oh, well, this is what these things normally look like. And when you're trying to present this argument, you will have cases that will back that up. So if you think of a system that's not thinking like a human, that's just thinking like a system, you can see where it comes to the conclusion that that's what you asked for, here you go. Yeah. And if you don't check that, because I've had that problem with it loads of times, it's very hard to get it to do real things. It loves imagining things. Like if I asked it to do like, say a script for emceeing today's events and the series of talks, and sometimes even when you direct it and give it the data and feed it in, like, and here's the list of speakers, it still will be like, and we're having like, Georgie Porgy is going to come and talk about this. It just loves to make stuff up.
Yeah.
But it's giving you what you asked for as far as it's concerned, because you asked for a script that has speakers, and speakers are talking about themes around arts festival and technology and things like that.
On that point, and we're going to, in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about actually some of the good things you can do with AI, some of the benefits, some of the ways it will help society, but also some of the ways it's kind of helping you right now on your phone and stuff like that. But just from the last couple of minutes and talking about how AI approaches the legal cases, and that was a matter of fact that the lawyer lost his job, he lost the case. It starts to get fuzzier, doesn't it, in the arts?
Yeah.
Because AI in the arts is now a debatable thing. Debatable in the sense of there's an Irish-led startup called Udio, and if you haven't heard of it, it's essentially the ChatGPT of music. You can go out on your browser, on your laptop, Udio, I think it's udio.com, just Google Udio, and you put in a prompt, sentence, 2 sentences. You say, do something like, give me a song based on 80s alternative rock style about something. And 30 seconds later, we'll come back with something that's very, very similar to an artist that you might know. For example, I tried it out. I put in a prompt. I asked it to give me a song about a tech journalist in a slacker rock style, like Loser from Beck, okay? So 30 seconds later, it returned a kind of a folksy tune with a twanging guitar about, a sort of a bummed out, 40, 50-something journalist from Dublin. And it was, if you had told me that track, and the vocalist as well sounded a lot like Beck. If you told me that track was from Mellow Gold, which was Beck's first album in the early 90s, I would have said absolutely. Now, the studios are going mad about this. They are saying this is copyright theft wholesale. What you're doing is you're scanning all of the recorded music, you're taking the elements, and then somebody comes up with a sentence or two, and you're essentially putting out a ripped-off song. But what Udio says, and this is what I want to get into, they say, no, hold on a second. What is music? What is pop music? What has every single pop singer over the last 60 years done? But essentially derive their styles, their beats, their guitar, their riffs, their drum rhythms, even their singing style from other singers. And that's currently in the courts at the moment. But it's an interesting argument, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is really fun to generate those songs, I will say. And what's actually quite interesting is how easily it can infer what you mean, because Suno, which is a similar app, won't let you say Beck, or because I have a niece called Kira, and because there is an artist called Ciara, I can't even get it to say Kira in a song because it has excluded you being able to prompt it with the word Kira, Ciara. But I did ask it for a country pop song, wanting a Taylor Swift-esque song, and that's what I got. Because scale is really important to these models, and if Taylor Swift is the biggest artist with the most listens, and she has quite a body of work as well, if you say country pop, it is going to default to Taylor Swift, rather than Seema. She's a bit smaller. So
the question is, AI in the arts, is that a future we're going down? Are we going to start using AI tools for creating art and music? Last year, I think, or a couple of years ago, Ed Sheeran won a copyright case. He was sued by the co-writer of the Marvin Gaye classic, Let's Get It On, because that was very close, the lawsuit said, to his own 2014 hit, which was called Thinking Out Loud. He won the case. Ed Sheeran won the case, even though it was similar. And he won because he managed to persuade the court that the building blocks were the same.
This is actually like, if you get into like the whole area of musical copyright, because even like when you do parody, apparently, do you know like when Horrible Histories does like parody songs, apparently they never have to get any of them signed off because everything is almost but not quite like the original. So it's not, the notes are ever so slightly different. It also, to us, like the uneducated non-musicians in the room, it all sounds like an identical parody, and they've obviously changed the lyrics because they're doing a historical story. But they've never had to get them signed off because it's just far enough away. Like it's approaching that song, but it's not quite there. So that's something that already exists in kind of music copyright, and it's an interesting thing when you then bring AI into that. But what you don't get, if you're talking about like creativity, people are thinking it's going to take work away from musicians. And like the songs are fun, but like it's not creativity, because like I said, scale is important. It will give you Taylor Swift-esque, but it's not going to give you a pivot she does into a new thing, because it can't really do new. Everything will be derivative.
That's the question, because in the 90s, I remember Stock Aitken and Waterman with their factory of like just look-alike, wannabe, the same stuff. Honestly, if they were out today, you would almost think that they were AI creations. Yeah. Okay, so where it gets even more interesting is with video and photography. So OpenAI's Sora, you probably saw these videos floating around 6 months ago. OpenAI's latest video generative technology, Sora, it can generate these unbelievably realistic videos. Someone walking through Tokyo with the rain at nighttime, a panoramic drone shot of a Western town in the 19th century. Now, it's not hard to see how movie studios, how small filmmakers, artists in general might start using this. And where does that leave the human element in art?
Well, creators will create. And I mean, even using digital tools to make art might have been frowned upon by Renaissance artists, but like it's something that's really commonly accepted now. And even say like the animations that we love to watch, the children's animations, like which every release they are pushing that genre forward with the things that they can do. You know, they do still reuse a background and just change it a little bit. You know, it's all built on the shoulders of what came before it. So I do think artists are actually a lot more willing to collaborate and use these tools than again, the media narrative likes to make it out to be. Yeah. And I think a really good example is when they take collective action, like the writer's strike did, and make it so that I can use it, but the industry can't use it against me, because that's what they won there. And I think that was so significant, and it's a model for any artist groups going forward to follow. Because essentially what they won in the contract, the WGA in America, was that the writers are allowed to use AI. Writers can use it as an assistive tool, as something that maybe prompts them or gives them ideas, because it can be useful for stuff like that. But a production company can't take their writing and use that to train an AI. So if they create a series, they can't just go like, right, you're fired and we're just going to create the rest the next season using an AI. They can't do things like that. So they can't exclude the writers from the process. If AI is being used for writing, writers are involved. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because loads of artists do want to use this stuff. Music artists want to use it as well. Udio was used to make one of the hits of the summer, which I genuinely still haven't heard, this BBL Drizzy song, which is part of the Drake and Kendrick Lamar beef, and it's I don't know, big trendy stuff that kids know about, and I don't really know much about it at all. But that was based off of, and this is the thing about music and sampling and where we've gotten with music. So someone had made a tune with Udio, and then someone sampled that, and it became like this massive track, and it was technically it's being seen as the first AI work that has been like really successful in the creative sphere. But it's still, there's actually so many human hands involved, because one guy created this Udio piece of it, and then some other guy sampled that, and he even released it and asked other people to rap over it. It was a real big collaborative experience, and all enabled using these digital technologies.
Well, now you've brought up the idea of jobs, okay, and that's another thing that we talk about with AI. And I'm going to, there's a Department of Finance study which suggested that 30% of jobs in this country will be affected by AI, possibly negatively. But there's actually, I think most of our jobs will be affected one way or the other by AI. I don't know if you've seen that website, willrobotstakemyjob.com. Any of you know that one? Actual website. I'm actually going to go on here, because what I'm going to ask, okay, a little experiment in the audience. I'm going to ask for a couple of you to call out your job title, and I'm going to go on live, okay? And I'm going to go on to...
oh my God, a live tech experiment. Okay, this is definitely not going to go well. Never goes well.
Robots.
How's the signal in here, Wi-Fi wise?
Yeah,
okay?
Will robots take my job?
I will say, while you're looking it up, that government jobs report that said 30% of jobs will be impacted by AI, it used a measurement framework that predates the existence or the release of generative AI models.
Correct, yes.
So it's already way out of date, and we really don't have a good steer on the impact in the Gen AI universe just yet.
Yeah, although it is also fair to say that the IMF is very pessimistic about it. It believes about half of jobs will be affected. On the other hand, people like Bill Gates say, no. It'd be like agriculture in the year 1900. Everybody was freaked out by tractors and other technology, but actually it made people's lives easier. Anyway, I'm waiting for this website.
Also made their lives a little bit safer. and lengthened their lives because they weren't, you know, reaching a certain age and completely injured by doing a lot of like physical work and labor and stuff like that.
I have the website, okay? Can I have a volunteer? Can I have okay.
Web developer.
What?
Web developer.
Web developer. Okay, web developer.
So sorry for your loss.
Now, this gives you a percentage as to whether or not your job is actually at risk. Web developer, 31%.
Oh, that's not bad.
Not bad, not bad. Can we have another one there?
Well, I really hope that's a low percentage for the safety of everyone here.
Can I ask what the difference between an occupational doctor and a doctor is?
Occupational doctors decide on people's ability to work or whether they're disabled from work and adjustments to the job.
Okay, I'm typing in occupational doctor right now. Okay, I have occupational therapist, health and safety technician. Okay, I'll go for that.
The data set.
0% channel, 0%.
Would that be very physical work? Do you have to kind of do a lot of, maybe kind of have a lot of empathy and have a lot of
0%.
in physical aspects of like, you know, assessing someone? Is it very hands-on?
Yes, but usually there is a screening process first. You don't see everybody, you know, certainly with the information you have, you can often make decisions.
Well,
call a certain amount of people.
we'll take one more job. Someone from the back.
Teacher.
Teacher.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I know what the answer to this is going to be. No, I think you're going to get good news. Post-secondary teachers, 17%. So that means that's 83% good, right? So that kind of gives maybe a flavor.
But if we take, so sorry, you're the highest risk here, web developer.
Yeah.
But I would say, yes, we definitely will be able to do certain aspects of web development using AI. Generative AI can stream up code, set up a website really quickly, all that kind of stuff. But what's interesting is when it comes to, say, the QA side of web development, of actually reviewing the code for quality assurance and making sure it's all good, it makes different kinds of mistakes than people would make. And you'd know working on a team when you're supervising code reviews and stuff like that, you would have a feel for the kind of mistakes that your team makes and like the kind of mistakes that a certain individual on your team might make. But AI is very much unpredictable in terms of the mistakes that it can make. And that's one of the kind of intricacies of it that we're still trying to figure out. So you still need someone that can do that oversight part. If they start training alongside AI from day one and they don't do the nuts and bolts stuff as much as people who were trained previously did, they may not be as good at review stage then. They may not have all that expertise built up. So we might actually end up with a shortage of expertise for the oversight side if we train with AI too much. And if you want like a corollary for that, in piloting, they're used to using automated systems for a really long time. That's been going on for years.
Oh, absolutely.
Like autopilot is an automation system and using like these kind of technologies.
And the new DART trains and a lot of all that stuff.
And you're trained to work alongside that stuff. You're trained to always like be working with some sort of technology. A study out of the States on the US aviation side of things found that in the majority of cases where an accident had happened, it was because of a lack of skill in taking manual control. Because this was a skills-based assessment. They were trying to see like gaps in piloting skills that maybe needed to be addressed.
Yes, and there's a whole other stream about driverless cars, which, by the way, are coming. Okay, they are coming. Not before 2030 in Europe, I think, but they are coming about that. But just to punctuate the is your job at risk, the study that the Irish government did, albeit only partially really up to date, most at-risk jobs, laboratory technicians, accountants, and telephone salespeople. So, right. Financial and insurance sector, also at risk. Information communication sector. The least at risk, agriculture, forestry, fishing sector. Now, what that corollary of that was that actually women appeared to be slightly more exposed. They're overrepresented in the sectors that might be affected by AI, because the sectors that almost certainly won't be affected by AI, agriculture, fishing, are dominated by men.
Yeah, and then it's kind of interesting though, because it's like, how do you sum up the entire job of work of a human being in your workplace? Because say like an admin role, like a secretarial role, like yes, a lot of that can be carried off by technology now, but your AI isn't going to remember it's someone's birthday and go buy them a birthday cake. And that's something that is like an emotional labor part of the workforce that's never really accounted for in any of these studies. And if you took it away from the workforce, it would be entirely miserable for all of us to be there. So we do have to kind of think in that kind of broader spectrum of like, well, like these are tasks we're talking about. We're not really talking about people, and people actually in their own personalities and their empathy and what they bring to a role actually enhances your workforce in many different ways. But the telephone sales operator thing is interesting, because the reason why that's so at risk is because companies that employ people to do telephone sales are already trying to employ the cheapest labor that they can get to do that. They just get them to work off of a script. They essentially want people to work like robots to do this job, making as many calls as they possibly can, following the script, make the sale, and do it cheaply. So the logical conclusion for that company is, and then I just get an AI to do it. And that becomes way worse for us, because at least human beings have limitations and they can't do 100 calls a minute, but an AI absolutely can. Like, we're already getting polluted with these scam calls and these robocalls. That's going to get way worse.
Way worse. And also the AI can't understand our accents when we say we don't want it. But anyway, let's just, we've kind of been neutral to negative on AI a lot during this, and there's loads more neutral to negative stuff we could add. On the productive side, there is some good stuff with AI. It is actually helping us. Most of us are already using bits of AI, like from very basic stuff like the autocomplete on your email, or to things like transcription. I don't know if any of you use voice-to-text transcription services. Changed my life as a journalist. Absolutely changed my life.
Yes. Even spell check. Like the fact that we have spell check and we take that for granted, and that makes people who aren't good at spelling come across more professionally, and that's a great thing, because people have different abilities, and like if it's enhancing someone's abilities without it being like, you know, superpowering them to the point of lying, like it's just helping someone along.
And other stuff, kind of wow stuff as well, like Samsung's latest phones, the S24, S24 Ultra, Fold 6, the ones they've launched this year, they come with what they call Galaxy AI, and they've hyped all this up, but there's one or two really interesting features. One of them is, if you're talking to somebody who speaks a different language, you speak English, they speak Spanish, French, German, whatever, it actually translates in real time, you to their language and them to you. Now,
everyone wants that phone now. Good sales.
Now, I've tested that thing. It works about 70% of the time, okay? But it is quite interesting, and that's only going to get better. That's genuinely helpful. It's genuinely interesting.
And that phone release, it's kind of like when Google launched the new Pixel phone, and all of the promo around that phone was about the photo features and the AI image editing. And the reason why they promoted that so heavily is because the more you use that feature, the more it was going to learn and be better, because it wasn't as good as it looked in the ads. And this feature will be like that. They're going to promote it heavily. They'll want people to use it, because the more real life use it gets, the better it can get. And that, like, if that gets better, that is a good thing. That's really, really helpful.
Where it starts to get a little bit dystopian is Microsoft. Of course, Microsoft's new recall feature from Copilot. So Microsoft has an AI assistant technology called Copilot. It's rolling it out across Office and that sort of stuff. One of the features called recall. And what it's supposed to do is that you'll never lose any information again. So you know sometimes, where the hell did I leave that on my desktop? Was it in a folder? Was it over here? Did I delete it? I've lost something. The idea is this feature will mean you just will never lose anything again. But the way it does it is it takes hundreds of photographs every second of your screen all the time.
Your password or your banking information.
And Microsoft says it's secure.
Yeah. But what they did was, even if they put all the security in the world against it, they just basically said, hackers, over here, we've got a treasure trove of information that people don't want you to have.
If someone was on Microsoft, because I'm sure I'll get a call from Microsoft, if someone was on Microsoft here, they would say, look, it's completely locked up in a kernel and all that stuff. So there are some security, and you do have to trust tech companies at some point with security. Most of us trust our iPhone, for example, for Face ID. So there is that point. But it can get dystopian fairly quickly. But for health, for example, I mean, there are good uses for AI in health. It can help to diagnose things from scans. There are millions of scans every year of sometimes complex things. If you have a large enough data set, they're starting to use AI to speed up, not to completely solve what an issue might be. Breast cancer, something like that.
Diagnostic support.
It's superb, yeah.
this is why the artificial intelligence thing is kind of a misnomer, because like it's good at stuff that we would never be able to do, like processing like decades worth of X-ray scans or lung scans, breast cancer scans and stuff like that, and finding the patterns in there that are going to be missed by a naked eye or something like that. We would never be able to do that. But then it can be rubbish at telling a muffin from a chihuahua in a picture, you know, and like that, like we have to think of it like what it's good at and focus on that. And the medical sector has done that, has found out what it's good at, and it's good at finding signals and noise that we would not be able to detect. There's a company based in Ireland using research from the Infant Research Centre into early newborn epileptic seizures. So early newborns can suffer seizures, and they're very hard to detect because they're such tiny little babies, and these little tremors can be imperceptible. So they use brain scans, and they scan like what looks like absolute noise, but there's tiny little signals in there indicating that there was a seizure at this early stage. And if they catch that stuff early, like it can change like the long life of that child. And that's like really incredible application of AI, because like a human being is never going to be able to do that.
No.
Is never going to be able to go through that much data and find these tiny patterns in it. That's what it's so good at. But that's why when you transfer that, it identifies patterns really well, and then it applies them. And that's why when you get it to generate photos, sometimes it adds the Shutterstock watermarks, the Getty watermarks, because like that's what it's learned from looking at images online. And the Udio stuff, they've actually generated songs that start with the line Jason Derulo, because he says that at the start of every one of his songs. Anywhere there's a pattern, it's good at replicating it. It's amazing at things to do with patterns, and with healthcare and diagnostics, pattern recognition is
very important.
So valuable.
Yeah. We've got a few minutes left, and we can take a few questions from the audience. There are 2 roving mics at the moment in the audience. I think they might be in the back at the moment. It's kind of dark for us to see you at the moment, but I can see one hand down here anyway, in the second row. If there's there's a few hands. Okay. 1, 2, 3 questions here. So there's 2 questions down here, and there's 1 at the back. So there's 1 mic there coming down here. Okay, we'll start here with this gentleman, and then we'll move to that lady. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. It was a very interesting talk, but I did feel you were speaking a lot about the state of AI as it is today. But Geoffrey Hinton and his comment, kind of this was based around, was more on artificial intelligence, and when it becomes artificial general intelligence, where that's going, will it kill us, all that. I feel we didn't really focus on that today, and I mean, I definitely feel there.
Do you have a view on that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What's your view?
Well, for starters, I think you dismissed a bit the reality of artificial general intelligence, and I definitely take on board what you're saying. I think even if and when that day comes, we're not going to know exactly that it is there yet. It's even the line of where you're going to measure that is now artificial general intelligence as opposed to just artificial.
And just for the benefit of everyone in the audience, when we say artificial general intelligence, AGI, we're talking about something that is almost indistinguishable from you and me. Actually, it's a lot more powerful than you and me in terms of its breadth and probably its depth, but in terms of its ability to spontaneously react, to spontaneously compute in an intelligent way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel, I guess, just when you look at AI as it is today, and I think my brother here said this sentence to me once and it stuck with me, it's what we have now is the most dumb version of this that we're ever going to have. Yes. So all it is going to be doing is getting better. And I think there is going to come a point, I think anyway, and this is a matter of opinion, so you can tell me I'm wrong, and that's equally valid.
But nobody knows, you see.
We will get to the point where it happens.
Do you think it'll happen in your lifetime?
I think it'll happen in the next decade or maybe 2 at the most. But one thing I will say, you did say, hey, because this is the thing that is the obvious human reaction. If it gets dangerous, plug it out. But I think AI, when it gets to a point where it's kind of sentient, if it ever does get there, the whole point is that it's smarter than us. It's not going to start becoming dangerous when it knows we can plug it out. So it will behave in a way where it's going to maneuver itself into a position where you can't plug it out or you can't stop it, and then it'll...
So you would agree with Elon Musk, essentially, on this?
Yeah. Not with everything that he ever did.
No, but on this point.
I don't want to accuse someone of that.
Quickly distance myself there.
It's amazing how quickly that has become a defamatory sort of stuff.
I know, yeah. But ultimately, anyway, and I guess this is a very matter of opinion kind of a thing, but that would be my take on it anyway.
I know, I suppose it's not scientifically impossible. you know, if you can dream it up and like the foundations of the technology exist, like that's what people are trying to move things towards even smarter technology. But it's also like what you define as smart. And yeah, if you ask an AI to run the world right now, it probably would eliminate all humans, because that's probably the logical thing to do to save this planet. And I know that sounds facetious, but like if you think how a system thinks, that would probably be the logical thing to do if you're trying to make the planet thrive, because we're a poison on it right now. But like if you were to get to that scale, the physical things that you would need to happen there are actually quite a big limitation there. And even the money. The money would be a big thing. So an April 2023 estimate on what OpenAI was spending on operational costs, not on training costs, was about $700,000 a day. So that company's definitely operating at a loss. How long that can be sustained for is a big question mark. And that's just the cost side of it. And like I suppose they can create a situation where they fund more money into it.
That's just the money.
That's just the money.
So to take your situation, so Sam Altman, you know, OpenAI CEO, he last year said we will need a breakthrough of a magnitude of order to be able to power it. So the energy required. So the amount of power, electricity it takes to fund one ChatGPT query, a simple text-based one, is about 10 times a simple Google query. That's roughly about 10 times. Now it's going into imagery, and then it goes into video, okay? You start that's just generative AI. For the type of thing you're talking about, AGI, and Sam Altman spoke specifically to this point, specifically about AGI. He said we'd need so much more nuclear, probably fusion. We'd need half the planet to be covered in solar to power it. So you might be right that AGI is the logical endpoint at what we are now doing, but in the next 10 years?
Well, I will say, for starters, Sam Altman has gone off looking for, I think it was $8 trillion. He's looking for the money, and he's probably going to get it.
But there's one company that can make the chips to do this, and it's NVIDIA. I mean, there's other competitors there, but it's really NVIDIA's game at the moment. They don't actually do manufacturing. So it's like Taiwanese semiconductor manufacturing company is the hotbed of all of the AI that's happening right now. And Taiwan is a highly contested area. Right. So how long that will even last as a situation has a big question mark over it as well. China could make a move on capturing Taiwan simply just to take over AI chips. And
Which
then
is a whole other session.
That's a whole other thing.
We might be able to fit in one or two. Thank you very much for the question. Yeah. I think there was one question right behind you on your left there. And then there's one at the back, I know as well.
Yeah. I've just been listening to a podcast, Cautionary Tales, and they were talking about this flight 447 Air France flight that crashed at the early part of this century. And what happened was the main pilot went to bed, and the assistant pilot was managing the plane. They went into a storm, and the sensors got frozen. Now, it would only take a minute or two for the sensors to defrost. But in that minute or two, he had to fly the plane himself. And he wasn't used to doing it. And even the main pilot had only had 4 hours in the previous 6 months actually flying the plane without AI. And the junior pilot panicked, and he started rising, which is what you generally do at takeoff, which is the only time maybe he was experienced as controlling the plane itself. So because he was rising, the plane didn't have traction and just fell and stalled and crashed. That was an instance where having AI was stopping the person having experience of doing it. Let's say if we automate everything in the world, there will be time where sensors, which is the kind of the basis of all AI, machinery. If they fault, then people have to intervene. And are they losing those skills to do it themselves?
Yeah.
It's a fair point. Yeah.
And it's something that comes up with the autonomous driving.
Yeah.
A lot. If there's not a manual override and a driver that's not asleep.
Although, leave Elon Musk aside, but I am quite excited about self-driving cars. Not only because it means I don't have to deal with traffic myself anymore, but also because categorically there will be fewer crashes. There will be some crashes involving AI, but absolutely will be fewer crashes. Nobody will be drunk. Nobody will be tired. Nobody will be screaming at somebody else. Nobody will be in a rush. The car will actually take. You go down to the pub, have your... Huh?
Everybody will, but the car will still be driving.
The car will still be driving, but you for rural drive, I remember ringing up Michael Healy-Rae about this a few years ago and saying to him, Michael, like, would you not be in favour of self-driving cars? Because if you think, he was on about rural pubs and the issues and the death of rural pubs. And I said, Michael, you can have your 5 pints, get in your car, put your Google Maps, tell you to bring the pub, bring it back, and you're absolutely grand.
So the challenge is getting there. And to get to that point, like, there will be deaths caused by these cars. Like, that is going to happen. And it's like, you know, how many of them is acceptable? Like, for some people,
that's the big question. Have any of you
zero.
been to San Francisco? Have any of you seen the Waymos, the Waymo self-driving taxis in San Francisco, which are on the road now? And if you go over to San Francisco tomorrow, you can sign up and book one and hail. There's only a few of them. But no driver. You get in the car, it brings you from A to B. Okay? That's a reality now. It's the only properly robotaxi firm in the Western world at the moment. We've one last question maybe from up the back. I think there was one. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm just wondering...
Sorry. I'm sorry, sir. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm just wondering how far you think AI will get to doing empathy.
Empathy.
How far can humans get? That's part of the question. So that would be one of the challenges is if you're trying to program things, you have to understand them yourself, and you have to understand them to a great extent. And if like our human instinct isn't actually that good at empathy, well then we'll just code in less empathy into these things. And obviously programming soft skills and things like that are quite challenging because it's hard to even train someone in that. Like sometimes we see those things as more instinctual, and anything that you would struggle to train a person to do, you will more than likely struggle to train a system to do, like because it works really well with very clear explanations. And actually something about AI, if you work with it using text prompting, it will make you better at explaining things to other people because it is very literal and it does need things to be explained very clearly and thoroughly to it, and it will improve that soft skill for you, which is a nice little offshoot of it. But yeah, I think the big challenge there will be like how good we are at empathy and explaining empathy and maybe training other people on how to empathize better.
And what you're also asking is, when will a computer have feelings? That's what you're kind of asking. And I don't think we're anywhere close to that yet. But what we were trying to address before in the early part of the conversation is, what is it that matters? That the computer itself has these chemically derived feelings, biological chemical feelings, or is it the effect of that empathy, the effect of those feelings that they have in the outward world? And there is a train of thought to say that if a computer is advanced enough, that what it displays as empathy has the effect on you or I and makes a situation better or changes a situation. Does it matter that the computer actually doesn't have the feelings? It does from a scientific point of view, but does it from a day-to-day, I'm getting on my life point of view?
And if it has skills like that and can manipulate you and it's got AGI, well then you've just created a psychopath.
Yep.
So that's scary.
So I think we're a little over time, but we do one more. Is there one more question? There's actually loads more questions. Go on. At the very back? Okay, top left. My apologies.
Hi, can I turn this on its head a bit and say, would any of us be willing to go back to 1980 when there was a hospital next door, the 300 beds, everything was on paper, we couldn't look for international experts for opinions on rare diseases, and say, well, look, we've transitioned so much in the last 20 years, should we not be optimistic about the future? The only caution I would say is that Ireland is so far behind the rest of the world when you think about where the States is from an infrastructure perspective on a day-to-day basis, in hospitals, in every type of thing you have. How much do we have to invest as a nation to the point that AI will affect our lives? And I think that's a bit of a bigger problem than actually an international phenomenon.
No, I would say you don't have to go back to the 1980s to go to a paper-based hospital, because I could just go to any hospital in Ireland and that would be the case, I'm pretty sure. But yeah.
I've just moved back from the UK, and I can tell you from an IT perspective in a hospital, I've gone to the dark ages.
Here,
yeah. Yeah, oh, 100%.
Although, double-edged sword, the UK hospitals and GPs all
That's why the UK hospitals
with the blue screen of death yesterday because they moved to that. But your point is well taken. I wouldn't go back to 1980, and I am a techno-optimist, basically, so I think that we are moving generally in the right direction. But with my GP, for example, or several GPs, they often can't tell me whether they're going to give me an appointment because there still seems to be this weird bartering system when you call them up. If the tone of your voice, it's like asking for Solpadeine or Nurofen Plus in a pharmacy. There's a secret handshake to it that's I don't think technology will ever solve.
Yeah. But talking about the kind of like, should Ireland be harnessing this opportunity? Like Ireland, because it's a small country and actually has a really, really robust knowledge economy, like there is huge opportunity for us to be a good test bed for some of these technologies. Like even when you think of things like driverless cars, the fact that we're an island nation, you could actually create a test bed out of Ireland out of that. But to do it safely in a way that won't kill a load of people along the way to get to perfection, everyone would have to agree, like, actually, we're going to clear the roads of your own cars so that we can test these and make these work really well. And there's precedent for that. So there's an area in like the Arctic Circle where they did test autonomous driving cars for ambulances to these like really remote locations. And driving through like extreme weather conditions as well, because you're talking Arctic Circle levels of snow and stuff like that. So it would actually be very unsafe to even send a human driving an ambulance up there. But if someone's in trouble and distress, if you could send an autonomous vehicle that could bring them back safely, and maybe it would fail 1 out of 100 times, but I think that person would take that chance. And when you create more controlled environments to do the testing in, like you can achieve things really like quite quickly with autonomous vehicles and stuff like that. Factory settings, which are very controlled environments, are actually furthering a lot of that technology a lot more than even the road testing, because the road testing is chaos. Like you're trying to blend autonomous cars with drunk people, not just drivers, drunk people stumbling into the street and things like that.
But they are doing this in San Francisco. They are actually doing this in San Francisco. There are Waymo taxis right now, like literally right now, driving around among the drunk drivers, among everything else, all the chaos. And that is happening at the moment. So I'd kind of be optimistic about that. I think we should wrap it up. Thank you very much to the Galway Arts Festival for Elaine Burke and myself, inviting myself here also, and to Katrina Crowe.
Give them a very big round of applause. I think we are far more enlightened now than we were an hour ago. Job done in terms of what First Thought is supposed to be about. It's a huge subject, and it was fascinating to hear two absolute experts at the top of their game telling us all about it and doing little experiments on the fly, finding out what people's jobs were and how soon they're going to be eliminated. Not soon, which is good news. The question about the health service is interesting because last year we had Dr. Martin Curley here at First Thought. He was hired by the HSE to design a digital record system for our health service. It's been bedeviled for years by lack of a digital record system. If you go to the wrong hospital and your files are somewhere else, they can't be got except by courier. And he left, he resigned, because every inch of the way he was resisted by the bureaucracy. They tell us they're now starting on another attempt to create a digital record system. We will see how that goes. But it's very hard to explain how some of the things in the HSE happen. It would take AI to explain it to us.
Can AI explain bad bureaucracy?
Exactly. Thanks to Elaine and Adrian for giving us such a really wonderful hour. And look at your programme, and there are tickets left for some of the other First Thought talks next weekend. So see if there's anything that takes your fancy, and we'd love to welcome you back again. Thank you very much.